Welcome into Chicago Bears Now. I am your host, Harrison Graham. We got a lot of Bears news and some rumors to get into, as well as, hey, final week before Week 18 on Sunday, so lots of stuff to get into. But let's start with Jim Harbaugh, who a report came down in the last hour or so that he would consider a return to the NFL. Now, he is obviously coming off his best season at Michigan, finally beat Ohio State, finally won the Big Ten, finally made the college football playoff. Obviously, they did not fare well against the Georgia Bulldogs, but maybe there's some thought in Harbaugh's mind of, hey, I got Michigan back close to the top, right? I won the Big Ten. I beat Ohio State. That was my goal when I came here. Didn't win a national championship, but we know he can be a good NFL coach. We saw it with the 49ers for 4 seasons. I would take Harbaugh in Chicago. Now, you know, would he be my number one target? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not my number one guy, but I do think it would be a good hire for the Bears. He played for the Bears as a quarterback from 1987 to 1993. He knows the city well. I think it would be a good hire if the Bears opted to go in that direction. You look at his coaching career. Look, he's never stayed in one place super long. Michigan's been his longest stop, his alma mater. But he was great at San Diego. That kind of got him started, got him the Stanford job, turned that program around. That job was a joke before he got there. Was great with the Niners, got to a Super Bowl, got to 2 NFC championship games, has done well at Michigan. And obviously, overall, he's been pretty solid as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm interested. The report mentioned the Raiders and the Bears as 2 jobs that would make sense. He was a QB coach for the Raiders in the early 2000s. Again, I said he played for the Bears. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Harbaugh is ready to make that jump back into the NFL. I do think he's a candidate that the Bears would interview. What do you guys think? Should the Bears hire Jim Harbaugh? Type H for hire, type P for pass. Get your votes in, and we got some more Bears rumors coming up right now. Are the Bears going to give him a contract extension this offseason? I'll go 2 smoking Jays. People are talking 50-50. I think it's possible. I think it's at least in the realm of possibility. Spotrac mentioned that the 2019 draft class is eligible for contract extension starting on January 10th, which is, of course, just in 6 days after the regular season ends. Montgomery will obviously be a player that the Bears have to make, a real decision on, because this is a good player, but he plays a position that doesn't have a ton of value at running back, of course, and that kind of poses that question on note number 3 there. Should the Bears invest heavily on a running back? I don't know. I think it's a fair thing to dissect within this football team, because Monty does bring a lot to the table. We can't dispute that, and that's not just on the field. He's a leader on this team. I think if the Bears had traditional captains and they didn't do captains every week, which is weird that Matt Nagy does that, one of the many things that he does that doesn't make sense to me, I think he'd be one of your team captains. He is a leader on this football team, not just for the offense, but as a whole, and he's obviously been a solid player as well. The yards per carry doesn't jump off the screen in his career, but he's also been behind some bad offensive lines, and he has been near the top of the NFL in broken tackles since he entered the league a couple of years ago. Almost 3,000 yards rushing, 21 touchdowns in just under 3 seasons here as well. So he's been a very, very solid runner, and something that he's brought to the table, especially the last year and a half or so when Tariq Cohen went down, and we haven't seen him since with that ACL injury, is as a receiver. And I saw this coming out of Iowa State, and I told you guys before last season, for some of you OG Bears Now subscribers, that Dave Montgomery is a good pass catcher, and he's proven that over the last couple of seasons. But all that being said, leadership, good player on the field, underrated player. Running backs are expendable. They just are, man. Like, unless it's Derrick Henry, or I'll throw Jonathan Taylor into that conversation now, you don't pay big for running backs. So you got to find some middle ground, because I would like to bring Montgomery back, but I can't pay him $10 million a year. Can I get him for 6, 7, maybe 8 at most? Can I get like a 2-year, $15 million deal where it's in that $7 to $8 million and you don't commit to him super long term? I would do that. But would I do 4 years and $40 million? No, that's too much for a running back in today's NFL, especially considering what we were able to see out of Khalil Herbert in some action as a rookie. So let me ask you guys, should the Bears extend David Montgomery? Type Y for yes, type N for no. We're going to make this the pinned comment on today's video, so if you get hit with a YouTube ad break, just let us know. Y, N, should David Montgomery get extended by the Chicago Bears? Keep it moving here. George McCaskey, is he seeking counsel as he navigates through potentially a big offseason? 3 smoking Jays. It's pretty likely. It seems likely. There's been a lot of rumors and loose reports out there. Not a lot of confirmed stuff, but Sports Mockery and a couple other outlets as well have said that George McCaskey is actually seeking the counsel or has sought the counsel of Tony Dungy, former Colts head coach, obviously a guy with very high character and that all NFL people respect at the highest level, that he's reached out and said, hey, help me out. I'm looking for counsel to navigate through what I should do this offseason. Head coach, GM, Ted Phillips, what is George McCaskey going to do? That's what he's trying to figure out, and it sounds like he's been seeking some counsel from some pretty notable folks in the National Football League, and obviously he and the Bears have some big decisions to make now. I mean, once this game is over on Sunday, that's when the clock really, it's okay, it's go time. You got to get this coaching search started, and you got to potentially get a GM search started as well. George McCaskey has all the power. This comes down to George McCaskey this offseason. What's he going to do? We think he's going to for sure fire Matt Nagy, but what does he do elsewhere? Does he fire a Ted Phillips? Does he keep a Ryan Pace? I think these are the 3 burning decisions, burning questions for George McCaskey. Number 1, who's the next head coach? I'm not even going to pose keep or fire Nagy. I think we all know that Matt Nagy's gone. I said on Monday's show, 99.9% chance he does not return. You never know. Maybe George McCaskey wakes up Monday and changes his mind, but I think that decision has been made. Let's assume that's the case. Who's the next head coach? That's something he's got to figure out. Now, before he does that, he's got to decide if he's keeping or firing Ryan Pace as GM, because if he's firing him or moving him to a different area in the front office, then you got to get a GM to help you with the coaching search. That's next. And then keep or fire Ted Phillips. Listen, you could also reassign him to just being in charge of the new stadium as well. These are critical times, critical junctures in Chicago right now. I mean, this is it, man. This franchise is at a crossroads. Do you want to be a franchise, a team, an organization that jumps into the elite and is a force to be reckoned with for the next 10 or 15 years, assuming Justin Fields hits with the right coach? Or do you want to be kind of what you've been, right, where you screw up the coaching hire, you can't get stuck out of mediocrity, ownership, fans question ownership, and you're just the biggest storyline around your team is, oh, what do you do with Soldier Field? This is it, man. This offseason will really be critical for the next decade for the Chicago Bears, and that's on George McCaskey. It starts with him. He's got to make these decisions in the short term, and if he does fire a guy like Ryan Pace, then he can hire a GM and get some help in picking the next head coach. So it comes down to this. Do you trust George McCaskey? Simple as that. It really is that simple. Type T if you trust him. Type D if you don't. Do you trust George McCaskey? Bears fans, I'm talking to you right now. Something that you can trust is how sick of a hoodie this is, and you can pick it up today for 30% off. Only here on Tuesday can you get the 30% off deal. So if you're watching live or if you're watching on Tuesday night, this is the time. The clock is ticking. You know how it's ticking on George McCaskey? It's ticking on you Bears fans right now. Get this hoodie for 30% off today at chatsports.com/Bears hoodie. That link will be in the comments. It'll be in the description of this video as well. chatsports.com/Bears hoodie. It's 30% off for a limited time only today. Take advantage right now. All right, how about hiring Leslier Frazier as the next head coach? We've kind of talked about this one other time. 2 smoking Jays. People are talking, and it's at least a possibility. You at least have to acknowledge that it is a possibility, and this kind of ties back into rumor number 2 of Tony Dungy giving George McCaskey counsel. Dungy is basically signed off as Frazier as the next head coach. He is endorsed him, says he believes he'd be a great choice for Chicago, assuming, of course, Matt Nagy does get fired. Nothing official yet. Many in NFL circles, not just Dungy, believe that Frazier will and does deserve another chance. His first stint in Minnesota wasn't great. Obviously, Frazier was a part of the 1985 Bears. He was a player from 81 to 85 in Chicago. I'll just be pretty upfront. I'm lukewarm on the idea. He's an older guy, which, look, hey, Bill Belichick's available. He's 70. Go get him. That's not the main issue. But he's an older guy that also hasn't had major head coaching success. that worries me a little bit, especially when the biggest part of your future is Justin Fields in the offense and figuring out if he is the guy long term. So do I want to bring an old defensive guy in? That's a little lukewarm of an idea for me. Now, Tony Dungy does bring up a good point, and I will mention this. He said, quote, he told Dan Wiederer this, "In this business, we talk so much about the relationships and the harmony needed between a GM, a head coach, and an owner, and how that has to be in place. You'd have to search long and hard to find somebody who wouldn't be able to work with Leslier Frazier." And that's a good point. Don't go to this next graphic, Jack. But at the end of the day, and I do want to talk about this Dungy quote a little bit more, while that is valid and relationships are critical, at the end of the day, the X's and O's still matter. You have to have coaches in place that know how to maximize their talent, that know how to utilize the players that they have. I'm not saying Frazier can't do that. I'm saying in his first stint as the Vikings head coach, he was like 12 games below 500, and the offense never took off there. So, yeah, he's a defensive coach, but he's got to pick the offensive coordinator. Do we trust him to do that? That's the most important thing. Like, the Bears' defense has been fine during the Nagy era. It's the offense that's been the problem. So you got to figure the offense out. And I don't know. I don't know if a guy in his 60s that failed in his first stint as a head coach should or even would be the answer in Chicago. I'm lukewarm on it. I'll recognize that is a possibility and that he's probably going to be a candidate that gets interviewed, but I just hope he's not a guy that McCaskey and / the GM zero in on, because I think there's a lot of quality candidates out there, not just a guy like Leslier Frazier. How excited would you be? I'm at like a 4 or 5. I wouldn't hate it. I think it would be a safe lower ceiling hire. I think he'd be solid, but I don't think he would, necessarily help this team take off. Scale it from 1 to 10, 1 being not excited at all, 10 being you'd be doing jumping jacks, popping champagne, sending me $100 super chats on our live show. I'm like a 4 or 5. It wouldn't be a disaster, but I'd be pretty lukewarm on it overall. Let me know what you guys think.